Okay, looks like it's 9:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this session. This session is entitled Striving for More Granular Statewide Broadband Data. Hold on, sorry. I had a little echo. Sorry about that. My name is Ben Shelton. I'm wearing a couple different hats today. I am the moderator for this session, and I'm also a presenter. So with me is Angie Bailey. We both work together. We're kind of co-located on the same floor in a building downtown here, but I work for the North Carolina Center for Geographic Information. I've worked there for the last 7 years. Primarily on the imagery program. Some of you may know me from that program, but I also work with the Broadband Infrastructure Office, which Angie is a part of, to do their mapping portion. So I'll let Angie introduce herself and then we'll get started and jump right in. Oh, and please use the Q&A in the chat session if you have any questions, and we'll answer those at the end. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Angie Bailey. I'm the Assistant Director of the Broadband Infrastructure Office. We are part of the North Carolina Department of IT, which CGIA is as well. And so we do a lot of different types of work. I've been involved in broadband at the state, mostly at the state level, for about 20 years. Of course, broadband's getting more and more attention as a result of people being home during COVID. And so anyway, we're happy to talk to you this morning. So just a few minutes, a little bit about our office, Broadband Infrastructure Office. We've been in DIT for about 5 years. We have a state broadband plan that's developed that's got, I think over 80 policy recommendations and issues related to broadband. It's a fairly complex topic. We do data collection and mapping with CGIA as our partner. We have a technical assistance team that works directly on the ground with local communities on broadband planning, have a community playbook online to kind of lead communities through broadband planning efforts. We have a last mile grant program to incent private sector providers to build out, and we have a large focus on digital equity and inclusion. So those are kind of, we're about an 8-person office, plus we have a few folks that work on first tech and first responder issues. And so one of kind of the challenges about mapping broadband is that, what is broadband? It's multiple technology types, multiple industries. So we've got, a lot of DSL still in the state, which is kind of our traditional copper telephone lines and those traditional telephone companies. We've got cable modem infrastructure from our traditional TV providers. A lot of companies have moved to fiber to the home. We've got new entrants in that space. And so kind of that can all be mapped in one way, direct connections to homes. And then of course there's the wireless side where we've got mobile. We've got fixed wireless, which is kind of smaller providers, maybe putting equipment on a macro tower and shooting it down to homes. That's usually line of sight. And then we got satellite. And so, people kind of want one answer and one way to map, but they're very different technologies. The companies have different types of data. So that's kind of important to think about when you're thinking about mapping broadband. This is just a quick look at our kind of mapping of by technology type. And so I know you can't see all the layers, but for example, the kind of gold color here is our fiber, counties that have fiber builds. And so, if we map it by tech type, that would tell us one thing about what these communities have access to. If you can see kind of the light purple, that's some of our DSL that's in the state. Of course, this is a layered map, so we can't see all the layers here. Our light green is fixed wireless. So we might have CGIA map by tech type for us in order to tell us, what's available in a particular county. Every county is different. And so the solutions are going to be different. And speaking, I'm sorry, one more thing on tech type I forgot to say is just that we do, we can also map by providers. And so we don't have that here, but, knowing what providers are in a particular county kind of tells us, again, how we can leverage assets, how we can leverage service that's already there. Sorry, Ben, go ahead. And then we also map, these are our North Carolina Broadband Grant Awards. And so kind of our key last mile programs right now are, our state program is the Great Grant Program, which incents private sector builds in unserved areas. And then we've also got USDA, their Reconnect and Community Connect programs provide funding to providers for last mile service. And then we've got the Appalachian Regional Commission, which puts funding into broadband. And so all those are a bit different. You know, for Great, Ben's going to talk more about this. We used to collect by census block, then we moved to parcels, then we moved to addresses. You know, for the Reconnect, Community Connect, we tend to get just polygons. And ARC is even a little bit different. So kind of the data available obviously dictates how granularly we can map where this coverage is going, because we want to know where the investments are being made, because we don't want to overbuild or pay for investments in areas that already have funding being applied. So I think that's just kind of a high level of what some of the challenges are, and then Ben's going to talk into the more granular issues and challenges.
Yeah, there's lots of those. So our primary challenge when mapping broadband availability is that the main data set that we are using comes from the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. They release a biannual data release. It's called Form 477. This data is it usually is a year delayed. So whenever we get the release, the currentness of the data is about a year from that time. But what you can see is it's a census block based data set. So any provider that has service in a census block can report as this whole census block is served. So all they have to do is serve one household, and they can report a certain speed and service level. So in this example here, the green area highlighted is the FCC data based on the census block. And so if you looked at the households in that census block, it would give you this look here where it shows the blue households are the served households at this speed threshold, and the red is unserved. But if you go and look, closely at the actual ground conditions, the actual availability, really you could see something like this, where there's a lot of households in that gray area that may be served based on the FCC data, but in actuality, they don't have service. So if you have policies and grants and things like that you're basing on the FCC data, you might be leaving out a lot of these fringe households that really need the service but are not eligible for funding. And so during our, as Angie mentioned, our grant program started by mapping things at census block as well. And then over time, we've kind of learned our lessons. We've moved to this new approach that we used in this latest round this past year, where we put together this application and we used the statewide address data set, the 2014 data set. So many of you might be contributing to the address data set in NextGen 911. We're also going to be leveraging that as soon as it's available. And we also leverage the statewide parcel data set. So you can see all these statewide GIS data sets really provide us a framework that we can then leverage to get more granular looks at some of this data. So what this map here is showing is an application we put together for the latest round of grant funding. And providers were able to come in here using the select tool, select all of the addresses that they say, hey, well, we want to go in and serve these locations. And they are able to select that, export it out as a CSV, and provide that as part of their grant application. So they can say, these are the exact households that we want to fund. Now, we also recognize that it's a 2014 data set. Things may have changed since then. So we also allow them, there is parcels in the background here. You can't see that. So the statewide parcels can be used to fill in the gaps if they say, well, there are households here, it's just not showing in the address data set. So we give them kind of a different approach if they need to fill in the gaps. And then using the same application, we will post the application points, and then other providers can come in and say, well, no, we already served this area at a certain threshold. They provide proof of it, and they use the same application to export out a CSV full of address points and say, well, here's the protested location. So then we're making apples to apples comparison, and really at a household level, we can see how that application is standing up. So a quick look at these numbers are really preliminary because we're still working through the contracting for the third round. But this is the overall status of the GREAT grant funding over 3 rounds. This started back in 2019. And so over 2 years, these are the grants that were awarded. These are just kind of highlight. If you zoomed in on this application, you could see more detail of the exact locations of each of these grants, but this was just kind of a high level dashboard to give people an overview. So this will be coming out on our NC1 map page eventually. This is not public yet, but it gives you a good overview of where that funding is kind of being directed. And like I mentioned, all of this data and everything we do, so we take in the statewide GIS data sets that many of you provide us, and then we're able to create a lot more granular looks at the broadband data, and then we try to push those data sets back out to NC1 map on the broadband page here to give everybody access to the data that we're creating and to give you kind of an overall picture. So if you have something going on at your county local level, you can come in here, pull in our data sets, and even contribute to some data sets, which I was going to get into. So the Friday Institute and CGIA and the Broadband Infrastructure Office worked together to put together a few different surveys. Jeff Searle mentioned this during the plenary. It's kind of a newer application, but they are able to collect crowdsourced information from the community on broadband availability in their areas. There's even a speed test that you can take through that survey, and it'll report all of that information into a data set that then we download from the Friday Institute and map it into a dashboard. So here on the broadband page on NC1 map, anybody can go here and be directed to where those surveys are. There's even a phone survey if people don't have internet. We recognize that you can't take an internet survey without internet access. So there is also a phone survey that they can take if you have no internet at all. But using this, you can get to the actual data set, or you can take it and go into our dashboard here to give a quick overview of a glimpse of all the surveys we've received so far. So currently right now there's over 40,000 surveys, and it kind of maps it based on service level. There's a few different combination of questions that are taken to determine what service level this response has. So really what we're interested in are those with no internet or below a certain speed threshold. So under 25.3, which means 25 download and 3 upload. That's kind of a good threshold that we use for a lot of different things and glimpses. You can filter this by county to see a county by county look. The red areas here are what the FCC data is saying is underserved or less than 25.3 service areas. But as you can see, there's a lot of red and orange that are outside of those red blocks, which means that these are the areas that I was talking about that are underserved based on the FCC data, or underrepresented, I mean. You can also pull in the survey result data and analyze it on your own end. So on NC1 map, you go into the data tab and it will have all of the survey responses here that you could either download as a shapefile, CSV, or bring it in as a streaming service. So I just wanted to highlight that data, I mean, even if you don't want to use it in our dashboard, you can take it and pull it into your own applications. And then I just wanted to highlight one last thing. During the COVID response time last March, we began compiling a list of public Wi-Fi locations. And some of you may have provided us with those locations. I know I received data from a lot of people. So these are locations, as students are at home doing online learning, they need to upload their schoolwork and things like that. There's a lot of public access Wi-Fi spots that are around there, and you can enter in your address, click or just click the current location button, and it'll show you all of the public Wi-Fi locations within a certain radius of your location. So then you can find the easiest access to get online. So this is another good resource, and this is right directly on the Broadband Infrastructure Office. They also have a long list of all of them categorized by county if you're interested in looking at that. So there's a few next steps, and Angie, you can jump in if you wanted to here. But we're continuing to gather the community surveys. We want everybody to contribute to this. If you're available and you can get this survey out to your local communities, we love the input. We also have great grant awards that are ongoing that I think Angie, you're still contracting for. And the one thing on the mapping side I will say is the FCC has released new rules, and they're trying to rectify the bad mapping data that they know exists by getting more granular input from providers. I think it's still a couple years out, so we're still waiting on that data, but it'll be interesting to see how they can leverage also the statewide data sets, the parcels and addresses and things like that to get more granular look. So that is coming. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, and I think just to add, it's, we like to say that the data from the FCC, it's just that it's not granular, right? So as Ben said, it's, because usually what people want to know about broadband is where's the last mile service. And that really rests with the companies that provide it. And so it's, years back, there was an effort when there was ARA funding in the state, with the U.S. Department of Commerce. They had the states collecting data from the broadband providers. That was from 2010 through 2014. And so our office that was in NC Department of Commerce at the time collected data directly from providers. And then in 2015, that moved to the FCC. So that just the FCC's Form 477 data was made public and published out for folks to use. And so it's really just figuring out how that process can be better. And while we're kind of waiting for the FCC's changes, as Ben mentioned, having these community surveys is really the best way to get into the partial within a census block. It's great that some of the homes in that block are served, but who doesn't have service inside those blocks? We will continue to work on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had Stephanie Jane Edwards, who you might be familiar with.
Yes.
She said these are fantastic data resources. Great job, Ben and Angie and the team. Renee Kramer asked for the link to the public broadband access site. That is awesome. So I think that's the Wi-Fi locations you're looking for. We've had some problems getting links put into the chat here. So if you just Google the Broadband Infrastructure Office, and there is a COVID-19 page, I believe, Angie, that has all those resources on it.
Yeah, it's ncbroadband.gov, and then I believe the link is on our homepage.
Right. Renee also had a question. What is the response rate for these surveys? So the survey was introduced, when was that? November, December?
It was really last summer, but then we didn't push it out till the fall, and the dashboards didn't come out till I think December.
Right.
So I think we have 40,000 plus responses.
Yeah, 42,000, and we've had a lot of responses from counties who have gone out and kind of done community outreach in their county, like Chatham County, I believe, was one that we had a lot of response rate really quickly. And then, so you can really see the highlights of where, see Chatham County there's a lot of responses there. So if we have, community partners, GIS departments and things like that at the county level that push this out, I think we'll get a lot better response rate. But
yeah, I believe
still pretty good.
Chatham pushed it out in their utility bills, I believe. We have had partnered with communities and counties on surveys in past years. I think the difference with this one is that we really needed a standardized data set. So, we're asking every county the exact same questions using the exact same speed test, so that we can use it as a standardized data set, especially if we're tying it to funding. So that's kind of the difference with this tool versus, and Friday Institute is our partner. They actually developed the survey with us. But that's the difference with this tool and with the funding pots that are out there now that didn't used to exist. That's why it's so important to be able to identify the unserved homes.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Let's see. William Haig asked, is there any way to track the reliability of broadband service? I have a family in Western North Carolina that have broadband speed DSL internet service, but it disconnects multiple times per day, every day. and is usually not as fast as advertised. This is pretty common throughout the community. The data show they meet the criteria for having broadband availability, but is not very reliable. So I don't, you can answer this, but
Yeah, I mean, we would encourage you, I mean, to take this survey if you haven't, because it does have the speed test on there. It does ask what tech type you're connecting with. We get a glimpse of who your provider is. And it does ask a question about satisfaction of service.
there's some qualitative response
Yeah.
possibilities for like low, happy, if you're happy with the service, and even I think cost and thing is already.
Yeah. So we would love to capture that if you would be up to participate.
All right. Andrew Stevens, if we have updates, more correctly, a removal for the Wi-Fi hotspots, who should we contact? You can contact me. My name ben.shelton@nc.gov. If you want to email me those locations, if there's updates or spots that need to be added, or if there's stuff that needs to be removed, please let us know. We'd like to keep that up to date because, I don't think this coronavirus thing is going away anytime soon. Toya King asked, what do you need counties to upload or make available on open source sites? What can we pull from your website, and are they locked by private entities? Let's see, upload to make available. I'm not sure about the open source sites that you're speaking of. You can clarify that, but you can pull any of the data that's on NC One Map is available, kind of like I highlighted for the community survey data. So if you go to NC One Map and on the broadband page, there's all of the data, there's data tabs on every card, and all of them will take you to kind of a list of all of the layers that are available. So we have FCC data that we've brought down and made available just for North Carolina. And then there's a few other things like adoption and availability indices. And there's just a lot of data. We had to actually take a lot of slides out of here because we wanted to leave enough time for questions. So there is some more data out there that you can explore. And as we make more things available, it'll always be put on NC One Map.
I would say there's never an end to what you can map in terms of broadband. I mean, we have in the past done more around infrastructure mapping, where's fiber, where the remote terminals for the service providers, where we work with a lot with communities on where your towers for wireless providers to come in. So this presentation is more focused on availability because there's still so much focus on folks that are unserved during the pandemic, but there's no end to what could potentially be mapped.
Yeah, the adoption piece of it is something I think we can map a lot more of, and we should, because we have those adoption indices that are out there, and they kind of combine data from FCC, and they combine American Community Survey data responses and demographics to kind of come up with adoption potentials and things like that. So all of that data is out there, might actually highlight some areas that might have availability, but just for certain reasons, demographics, whatnot, just are not likely subscribers to the data, maybe need some more outreach. All right, Stacy Culpepper said, thanks for your work. This is really great information. Thanks for a really good presentation. Jessica Knight says, are you looking into doing any work with Starlink for better satellite internet access? Current options have a very high latency, data caps, and slow speeds, which can make it very ineffective. My parents have satellite as their only option. Video calls are impossible, and data caps make it tough to do a lot on it. I know they aren't alone. Their street has Spectrum service at both ends, but not on their section. It's been very frustrating.
Yeah, and actually I was just going to mention that these maps we've been showing don't have satellite and cellular mapped, because that's kind of a different type of solution. But we do have a pilot. We do have some pilots we've just launched with Friday Institute with SpaceX, and one is in Swain County, one's in Hyde, and I believe we're still deciding on the third county. They're just now starting to roll out service in North Carolina. So I think we'll see more of that. We'll know more about that in the spring. We also have a satellite grant program that will be launched in the spring that will provide subsidies to the winning provider, which could be Starlink, because the grant requires better latency numbers, if that's the way to say it. So we are working with that, and we do expect to see more Starlink rollout in the spring.
Yeah, and Starlink was also a participant in the federal funding,
Oh, right. Yes.
the RDOF fundings
Yes.
that's released. So they are a part of that. So I think they're getting a lot more involved now that they're actually able to test the service and things.
And that's the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. They had an auction. The bids were finalized just released this month. And so those winners will be receive money from the FCC over the next 6 years to build out in certain areas.
Yeah. And then Will Corbett, are there any adoption per availability type metrics? So comparing the adoption and the availability together. I don't think we've considered that, but that's an interesting thought. Maybe if somehow getting it weighted to, well, they have availability, but they're not adopting, or they're just not adopting because there's not availability. I think that's what the comment's meaning. But no, we haven't really combined those two.
Well, we do have, within this, we do have this broadband adoption and availability index, which has a lot of data. So we didn't kind of dig into it in this session. It is on our website. But yeah, they're directly related, right? If a company's going to invest in building out, they want to know that people are going to adopt.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do a lot of work around adoption.
And I pulled up the slide that we didn't include, but this is our adoption and availability indices. This is the dashboard we created. The Broadband Infrastructure Office had a guy out of Purdue University create these metrics that combine all of these sources. And the adoption index does include some availability metrics. Kind of, you see up in the top right, there's households with no internet access and things like that. So those are really availability metrics, but they're still being rolled up into the adoption index. All right.
But yeah, I would definitely recommend checking that out if whoever asked that question.
Yeah, will. Yeah, and if there's any data that you feel like we need to include, if there's something missing, we're always looking for feedback. So feel free to put your comments through the NC One Map feedback, and they'll get routed to us, and we can.
Oh. I think you're muted, Ben.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I lost the internet for a couple minutes or seconds. There is one last question about the surveys. Have you tried working with data from popular speed tests like Ookla and the like? And we did look in that, didn't we, Angie?
Yes, we looked at actually trying to purchase it, and it was more than what we had a budget for at the time, but that's something we still are looking into. And there's Ookla. There's also, I think, the National Association of Counties had a survey that they were pushing out. There's MLab. There's lots of different speed tests out there. So we have talked about how to fold some of those in. I think we just have to make sure the questions are standardized enough, or that the way the data is captured would fit in with our process, and if the data is available to us.
Yeah, and the one thing we didn't mention on this last slide here is that, are you seeing my slides at all still?
I can't see your slides now.
No. Well, we are working with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. They're doing an effort to create a broadband availability map at the federal level. And they do have some Ookla speed test data that through their platform that we're trying to pull through as well. But it looks like we're running out of time here. There is a break at 10, so check out the other sessions. But thanks everybody for attending, and thanks Angie.
Thank you.
A lot of information in 30 minutes, so it went really